Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. So welcome back to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine Hemingway, and we are here for another installment of Ladies of the Luxembourg Gardens Part 2. So you heard all about one side of the garden in our last episode. Now we're going to do the other side, and feel free to listen to the show as you walk through the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris and learn all about these beautiful statues. I'm going to let Claudine take it from here.
Yeah, now we are doing the northwest side. If you were looking at the palace, it is on the left. Again, the beginning of last week's show, we talked about how this was the garden created by Marie de Medicis in 1611, and in 1848, Louis Philippe wanted 20 statues to be placed in the garden that were all dedicated to the great women in French history. He actually, for what we see that the Luxembourg garden is today, is more due to Louis Philippe than it was to Marie de Medicis. But, you know, she had the idea there, and the palace and the awesome fountain. So
all the stuff.
We can still give her some credit for it. Yeah, but starting on the side closest to the palace, the first one is Saint Clotilde, otherwise known as what Spellcheck thinks my name is usually. Which Clotilde is just as obscure as Claudine. I never really understood that. But she was born in 473. She was the daughter of the Burgundian king, Chiperic II. He was killed by his brother, Gondeband. At 11 years old, Clotilde was sent as an ambassador, visiting all of the areas of France.
Killed by his brother?
Killed by his brother, yes. His brother tricked him because his brother wanted to be the king, tricked him and ended up killing him.
That's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, when brothers and sisters don't get along now, but it doesn't get, usually, hopefully it doesn't end to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Clovis, who was king of the Franks, heard about her and her beauty and her strong vision of the court and asked for her hand in marriage.
Well, that's romantic.
Yes, very sweet. She was a very devout Catholic, and she, at the time, said that she would, but she wanted to be able to create a convent while she was married to him. At the time, Clovis was not. At the Battle of Tobiac, he prayed that if he survived, he would pray to the god of Clotilde. That if he was victorious, he would end up becoming Catholic. So he was, and then so he was taken afterwards to on Christmas Day. He was baptized in Notre Dame de Reims up there in the Champagne region. She was very close at the time also with Saint Geneviève. So we know these people as Saint Clotilde and Saint Geneviève. Like Clotilde's just hanging out with, Jenny. Jenny Geneviève. She was very close to her. She was the one that basically spearheaded the fact that they needed a church dedicated to her, a tomb dedicated to Saint Geneviève. In 511, when Clovis died, he was buried there up at the top of the Mont Geneviève, Saint Geneviève, which is where the Pantheon is. That's kind of called Saint Geneviève. The next year she died and was buried next to him. Clotilde would spend the rest of her life writing about the story of Saint Geneviève, which her writings ended up getting her to the path of sainthood. thanks to Clotilde. And we basically know the whole story of Saint Genevieve because of Clotilde.
Not a bad deal.
Not a bad deal. Clotilde died in 545. She ended up being also canonized and becoming a saint, of course. Back then, it was a lot quicker to become a saint. I think I remember when they were talking about Mother Teresa becoming a saint, they had to have like proof of miracles and a certain amount of time has to pass and all this stuff. It was a little quicker back then in that day.
Less proof needed.
Yeah, but Saint Clotilde is the patron saint of widows, brides, those that are exiled, and the women who have ill-tempered husbands.
Ill-tempered husband. I like
that part. Yeah, if you have an ill-tempered husband out there, Saint Clotilde is your girl. Yeah. Marguerite de Provence is our next one. She was born in the spring of 1221. We don't know exactly what day. She was the oldest daughter of Ramon Berenger IV, the Count of Provence, and Beatrice de Savoie. Her sisters would end up becoming the Queen of Sicily, England, and Germany.
Wow. Successful family.
Parents.
Yeah.
For their kids, for their daughters. Blanche de Castille heard about her and how beautiful she was. So in 1233, she sent a knight down to Provence to see her and broker a deal for her to marry her son, Louis IX. She was very religious and very pious. So, of course, Blanche liked that for her son, Louis. At 13 years old, on May 27th, 1234, she married at the Cathedral de Sens. She ended up marrying Louis. Blanche was very overpowering. She spent all of her time with her son, Louis, who would end up becoming Saint Louis, Louis IX. Marguerite and Louis were very close. They had a very close relationship. They spent a lot of their time together reading and riding horses. And Blanche did not care for that. They were on a crusade in Egypt. And Louis IX was captured in 1249, and Marguerite was able to gather enough money to have her released. She was also very deep into her pregnancy at the time and ended up having her son while she was down there brokering this deal to have her husband released.
Sounds like a badass.
She was badass. In 1270, Louis IX died on a crusade in Tunisia. His son Philip III took the throne. Marguerite was such a skilled negotiator that she was asked by her son to solve many disputes and guidance after her husband's death for her son. She ended up also starting and finding some ministries in the Order of St. Clare, where she died on December 20th, 1295 at 74 years old.
74?
Yeah, pretty old for that time. She's buried now next to Saint Louis at the Basilique Saint Denis. And she was left pretty much unmarked because she wasn't buried right next to him. She was buried near him. And so they didn't think she was anything special. So she was one of the few that was not desecrated during the revolution.
74. Wow.
74. That's pretty old for back then.
For sure.
Yeah. Anne de Breton was the oldest child of Francis II of Brittany and his second wife, Marguerite de Foix. She and the infant of Navarre. Her mother died when she was just 3, and her father died when she was 11. Since he didn't have any male heirs, he named his daughter as the heiress to the estates of Brittany. He promised many princes and heads of countries her hand in marriage, but would die on September 9th, 1488, making her to promise to never leave Brittany or let it fall to France, because at the time these things were all separate. In December of 1490, at 13 years old, she married by proxy the Maximilian I of Austria, giving her the title Queen of the Romans. But when Charles VIII found out, he went to Reims and forced her to leave the marriage. After 2 months, a siege, Reims fell. And on November 15th, the treaty ended and basically also helped end her marriage. On November 17th, 1491, they were engaged and they were married. Austria protested because at the same time that she was supposed to be, betrothed and with Austria, so was Charles. So they were not happy about it. They had this quick secret ceremony. But Pope Innocent the Eighth was also quite upset because they too were also fourth cousins. He finally validated their wedding in February of 1492. But they spent most of their time apart. She became pregnant every 14 months and suffered many miscarriages and stillbirths.
Ugh,
And then all of this, Charles died at the age of 27.
27.
Yeah, so you would think when you hear the story that it says, they're in their 40s. He was just 27 when he died, 1498, after running into a door.
What?
He was going to go play jeu de paume, basically tennis, hit his forehead on the top of the door and ended up dying a few days later.
At
At
27.
27 years old, yeah. Louis the 12th, he basically also had said in their contract that if he was to die, she had to marry his successor.
Mm.
So Louis the 12th is now in power. He was already married at the time. He ended up having to have it annulled. And in the contract, it had to be annulled within a year, or else she didn't have to marry him. And so she thought, okay, great, this stuff takes forever. This isn't going to happen. But Pope Alexander VI had it annulled in 2 months. They were married in November of that year. They had 5 children. 2 survived, Claude and Renee of France. She ended up dying of a kidney stone attack in 1514, and her
Ugh.
funeral lasted for 40 days.
What?
Yeah. Her heart was placed in this in a gold reliquary. It was sent to Nantes to be with her parents. It was recently in 2018 stolen
Mm.
from the
What?
museum and then later returned.
What? Who just gave it back?
There was some thieves took it and somebody ended up finding it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's kind of at the same time like, well, it's encased in gold, but still kind of gross. Of course, our next lady is someone people might know a little more about, Anne d'Autriche, which we'll have an episode about her coming up here in the next few weeks. She was born September 22nd, 1601. She was the Infanta de Spain in Portugal, Spain and Portugal. But she is called Anne d'Autriche because her mother actually was Marguerite d'Autriche, who was of the House of Austria and Habsburg. So even though
Long.
she was born in Spain and her father was over Spain and Portugal, she's still called Anne of Austria. She was very religious. At 11 years old, she was decided that they would marry her off to Louis the 13th. At just 14 years old, her mother-in-law, Marie de Medici, stood over their bed waiting for them to consummate the marriage on the night of their wedding.
Ugh.
They ended up not doing that right away. Marie was upset about her and having too many of these Spanish people in the chateau. So she had them all sent off that she could only be surrounded by French people. She made their life a living, it's just living hell. She spent most of her time creating churches. And as she got older, she was having a hard time getting pregnant, which is, of course, their entire role. And, again, her husband's Louis the 13th. And so she would she'd go around to these churches and have churches created, and she would lay the first stones, including the Saint Sulpice over in Saint Germain, and also Val de Grace Church. She in 1634 commissioned the building of the Val de Grace, and she said that she would do it. She said, "I will have this built if you could, please bestow a child on me, a son." On December 5th, 1637, on a very stormy night, Louis the 13th had left Paris and he was forced to return because of the storm. Supposedly, the story goes that he came back to the Louvre and the only bed that was available to sleep in was the bed of his wife.
They finally make a baby.
They finally made a baby, but when you think of the fact of how many rooms the Louvre, I mean, it was not the size that we know of it today, but it still was pretty large. But a lot of times they would actually pack your furniture. They would take your furniture would travel with you.
Wow.
So, but it's still kind of strange that really there wasn't a single bed in the entire place that she stayed there. But on September 5th, 1638, almost 9 months to the day, Louis XIV was finally born. Some
Fine.
think, and I love this story, I kind of think that this would be fun if this was the truth, was that it was actually the Cardinal Mazarin that is the father. But when I looked into that even more a few years ago, Cardinal Mazarin wasn't even in France at the time. He had left, and I can't remember where he was, but he wasn't even in France. But I thought that'd be pretty cool, that the fact that, we'd find out that the Sun King that built the sun literally rose with him wasn't even actually of royal blood.
I mean, I feel like that could have happened a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Da Vinci Code. Like, I want the Da Vinci Code to be like, I think that would be super cool. But this would be like the Da Vinci Code of the royal family.
Yeah.
Everything would be changed. He kept his mother in the luxury. She had two sets of apartments at the Louvre. She had her summer apartments and she had her winter apartments. The summer apartments are the side of the bottom of the Sully wing that face towards the Seine, where you could go in there to see the huge statue of Tibert. You go in there, the rooms are amazing. All of the ceilings are painted. Everything it's stucco. Every single square inch of that thing is covered. It is different from when she was there, but it still was pretty lavish at the time that she was there. And they actually had a pretty close relationship. She later returned to Val de Grace, and she ended up actually dying and being buried there later on.
She died young?
She died at 64.
That's a long time.
I know, that's quite a long time. Blanche de Castille, of course, we mentioned her. She was the mother of Louis the Ninth. She ended up also helping to broke a peace treaty in 1200. She was so close with her son after her husband died when she served as regent for a while. The two of them were inseparable. She was definitely the very overbearing mother. She forbid any royal heirs in France and many in England to ever say a bad word about her son. She actually would lead attacks on to squash rebels that had anything bad to say about her. They were very close, and so then, of course, when his wife comes into the picture, she didn't like that very much. But if you go into the church that's on the Ile Saint Louis, that is dedicated, of course, to Saint Louis, because that is where he used to pray before it was ever this incredibly fancy, expensive island. That church in the back, there is a whole chapel dedicated to Blanche de Castille and has beautiful stained glass windows of her.
Love that church.
It is a very cute church. Anne de Beaujeu, who is also Anne de France, was born in 1461. She's the oldest surviving daughter of Louis XI and Charlotte de Savoy. When her father died, her brother Charles VII took the throne and was too young to serve, so her father had actually named her a regent. Charles VII was thought to have a feeble mind, quote unquote, that is what his father said, and put her in charge of him to oversee and serve as regent for her feeble-minded brother.
I like that he put a woman in charge of a man.
I know, exactly. At 12 years old in 1473, she married Peter II de Bourbon. He was 35 years old. She became a teacher to the royal children at court, including Diane de Poitiers and Louis de Savoie, the future mother of Francois I. She was very smart. She had a very good head on her shoulders. She ended up settling many of her father's disputes with others and rivals. She, with the mad war between the leaders of Orleans, Brittany, and Lorraine, she ended up kind of going in and settling all these things. She was known as Madame La Grande. She is the only surviving. She had only one surviving child, Suzanne, in 1491, and who would actually die before she did. She died in 1522, spending her entire life with her brother and her family. She even wrote a book for her daughter, telling her to surround herself with frugal people, and the true nobility deserved that they needed to be humble and benign and courteous.
She sounded like a nice lady.
She was a very nice lady. Yeah, she was a very nice one. That's a fun one to see in the garden. The next one, I just love her name, and she is a Italian. This one's for Giuseppe. Valentine de Milan, Visconti. She was born in Milan to the Grand Visconti of Milan, and she was proposed to marry, but she didn't want to. She wanted to wait, so. Louis I, the Duc d'Orléans, asked her. They were very close relatives as well, so the Pope had to actually sign off on it. On January 27th, 1387, in Paris, the contract was signed. They had a huge marriage celebrated in Milan and in the French court, and on April 18th, 1837, but she wouldn't finally leave for France except for 2 years later.
2 years.
2 years. On June 23rd, 1389, she finally arrived in France. The formal meeting came down in August in Milan in 1389. They had 8 children, 4 survived. Her husband, Louis d'Orléans, was killed on the Rue Saint-Antoine in the Marais on November 23rd, 1407, by a group of men with axes.
Ugh.
Yeah, not good. 3 days later, she learned that his cousin, Jean Saint-Peur, the Duke of Burgundy, had him killed. And if you're in Paris, one of the only medieval structures that is left that you could go see is the Tour de Jean Saint-Peur that is in the Marais. It's kind of set off back down the street on the, I think it is the Rue Etienne Marcel. In the Marais. It's really interesting to go see. It's all that's remains of the castle that was there, but it did belong to the cousin that killed him. This sparked a feud and a civil war between the Burgundians and the French royal family that would last for 28 years.
Wow, big. Well, I mean, that makes sense. The guy was killed with axes.
Yeah, she tried to get justice for her husband, but the next year, on December 4th, 1408, she actually ended up dying herself at the age of 38.
She was so young. What happened to her?
She died. She was trying to do everything she could to clear, so people knew this real story of the, Jean Saint-Peur, which is Jean without fear. Clearly, he didn't have any fear to kill his cousin.
Fearless,
yeah. Marguerite d'Angoulême of Navarre was born April 11th, 1492. She was born to Charles, who was the Comte de Angers, and Louis de Savoie. At 4, her father died, and her young brother, at just 2 years old, Francois I, became King of Navarre. Her mother wanted her to marry Henry VIII of England. Thank God that didn't happen, because we all know the stories of the wives of Henry VIII. None of them ended very well.
Yep.
She was very beautiful. She was said to have these beautiful violet blue eyes. She ended up marrying Charles IV of Alençon by decree of Louis XII, so he could keep the Armagnac region. Charles died in 1525, and her second marriage was to Henry II of Navarre in 1526. In 1528, she gave birth to a daughter, Jean III, who was the future mother of Henry IV. She and her brother, Francois Premier, were very close. He ended up actually bringing her to court with him. She would work on throwing large parties with Leonardo da Vinci. As we learned in the Francois episode, he actually would have Leonardo da Vinci be in charge of party planning and costumes.
That's so cool.
Which is hilarious. She ended up creating this salon that was held in the Louvre that would end up becoming the thing to do in all of England or Europe and England and France. Everybody wanted to come to this. She, with her, helped her brother completely redesign what the idea of the monarchy was and what court was about, including, all of this music and art and everything. She died on December 21st, 1549, after spending all of her time with her brother.
Well, they were very close.
Very close. Of course, we have the lady of the garden, Marie de Medicis herself, Born on the fantastic day of April 26th, 1575. My birthday sister, not the same year. She was the daughter of Francois the First de Medici and Joan of Austria in Florence. Her mother died when she was just 2 years old. Her father remarried, but he would also die 10 years later, the same day as his second wife, Bianca. They were believed to have been poisoned by another Medici family member. She was raised by her uncle Ferdinand I, the Duke of Tuscany. Many suitors came calling, wanting to marry her, but it wasn't until Henry IV of England came, or I keep saying England, Henry IV of France came knocking that they finally agreed. She was 25. She was quite the old maid to be getting married. The marriage would help eliminate the debt that France owed to the Medicis, but they would also pay him a large dowry to marry her.
Wow.
So it was a pretty good move on the French side. The two were married by proxy on October 5th. Her cousin stood in for Henry. They finally met December 12th, 1600. 9 months later, almost, Louis the 13th was born.
9 months, right on the dot.
Almost right. Oh, pretty close to right on the dot. After 10 years of asking, she was finally crowned. At the time, the queens of France were also crowned, but they were not crowned in Reims. They were usually crowned at the Bastille Saint-Denis. After 10 years, she kept asking and asking. He kept pushing it off. He finally agreed to say, okay, we'll do this. She was coronated on May 13th, 1610. The next day, Henry IV was brutally killed going through the streets of Paris.
That was really horrible how he died.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible. So a lot of people thought it was she was under suspicion because of the timing of it was a little too close. Louis the 13th, her son, he was only 8 at the time. He was very close with Henry. He was actually a very loving father. Marie, not so much. And we did a whole big, huge episode all about her that we'll link on the website. But she ended up, once he reached the age of 13, that he should have been able to reign because she served as a regent. She would not let go of that. He waited, and when she turned 16 in 1617, he basically he exiled her to the Chateau de Blois and took the crown. The two of them had a pretty contagious relationship. He constantly would send her away. She'd come back. Later, she went to go leave France, and he actually had her intercepted, and she was stripped of her pension, everything, and never returned to Paris again.
They had a very mother-son relationship.
Exactly, yeah. She, of course, we all know her for creating this beautiful garden and the palace. She also had Peter Paul Rubens create what is known as the Medici cycle of paintings. There's 25 paintings. They're all in the Louvre today. They're absolutely amazing. They are paintings of moments in her life, many of which that were greatly embellished to what the story was, even making it look like the relationship with her son was a little bit better than it was as well.
We all like to do that.
Yeah, but it is like one of my favorite rooms in the Louvre. It is amazing. It's in the Richelieu wing. It's on the second floor. It's usually maybe tops 5 or 10 people in there at the same time as you are. It's this huge room. For a short period of time, it was not that way. When they moved the Mona Lisa into the room, when they were doing renovations on her room over in the Denon wing, it was a disaster. And I avoided it because the way that they had it with all of these stanchions and queues to go through. So I was very happy when they moved her back, and you could have the room of Marie's life back.
I need to go see it. I don't think I've ever made it into that room.
I'll take you. I'll go and show you.
Go show me.
Yeah. The Richelieu wing is my favorite because it's where you will find the French paintings and also the Sully wing, the paintings, and then you also have the Corps Puget and the Corps Marly and all the statues down there. And you will hardly have anybody in the entire wing when you're there.
Yeah, empty. A lot of it's empty.
A lot of it's empty because everybody just comes in to see Mona Lisa, and sadly, a lot of them leave. So if
Yeah.
you're going to be in Paris this fall and you want to go to the Louvre, let me know because I'll change your mind about the Louvre. Our last one is another lady that could possibly not be real. Laure de Neuve. She might have been a made-up person. What we do know of her is that she was born in 1310 in Avignon to the Knight of Audebert of Nauve. She was at 15 years old. She married Hughes de Sade, who was an ancestor of the Marquis de Sade. They were married on January 16, 1325, and that's about all we know. Francesco Petrarch was a poet. He saw her one day on Good Friday on April 6, 1327. At Mass at the Église Saint-Clair d'Avignon. He was mesmerized by her. For 3 years, it's a little creepy. He spent all of his time basically watching for her, watching her walk, coming to church, going through parks, and he would write like numerous poems about her. That is basically how we kind of know her. We don't know if, that's where it's kind of like she could have been kind of a made up person. But he would write these long, lavish odes to her about how beautiful she was and everything. And that's another one of why is she one of the 20 statues.
Sounds like a stalker.
Yeah, it is kind of like a stalker. I mean, he basically followed her around walking through parks and through the city and wrote poems about her. Now that would be a restraining order.
Yeah, you call the police on that guy.
Yeah, a little creepy. But then it was just this beautiful romantic gesture.
Oh, gross. I'm just so curious how they picked which of these women to put there. It's so interesting.
It is really interesting. And I actually have a book that I actually picked up at the Palais de Luxembourg. And it's all in French. It's about each one of them and about, the creating of the artists and who did each one. But it kind of says, these are the ones they picked. But it doesn't really give you the why on a lot. I mean, you could understand Marie de Medici. That's easy, some of the other queens and stuff. But, the Clemence and some of these other ones, it's like, but why that one? And why not? There is no Marie Antoinette. There isn't a Catherine de Medici. There isn't. I mean, there's so many other queens in time. And again, they're not all queens. So, but it is kind of interesting, the ones that it's almost more interesting, the ones they didn't pick.
It's very random.
Yeah, but the poor Jeanne d'Arc, she was out there for a few years and then she was just getting battled by the elements. And so they moved her into the Louvre. She's over in the Richelieu wing in the Corps Puget. And it's very interesting when she's actually not wearing armor. We actually talked about her in one of the episodes, The Ladies of the Louvre. And she kind of has her hand up next to her ear where she's like listening to, it's an ode to the listening of the voices talking to her. And she's not wearing her armor, which is usually how she's always depicted.
I'm gonna go visit her too. I probably walked right by her and didn't realize it.
That's one of my favorite. The Corps Puget and the Corps Marly is so wonderful because they have the atrium, the glass ceiling over it that I.M. Pei created when he also, at the same time he was doing the pyramid. Wow. He created these. They used to be parking lots, and so it used to be the ministry office, and so they, changed that over. It's a perfect place for all those statues because they are so heavy that they're able to, they're on these marble floors. And so it's just really great because a lot of people, don't really spend a lot of time in those. They kind of use them just to pass through somewhere else. And they're absolutely, sometimes I just go in there. If I have an hour, I'll just go into the Louvre and sit in in the Corps Puget and just look at everything.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite parts too. I can't believe that used to be a parking lot. I didn't know that.
It used to be a parking lot. So was at the time in front of it where the pyramid is. Long ago, that was filled with houses. And there were streets and houses, and they ended up actually the king ended up having to purchase some of those before they demolished them. And then it ended up being later a parking lot there, because that whole Richelieu side and what is known as the apartments in Napoleon III, those were offices of the
Interesting.
ministry. Yeah. And you used to be able to park right in front of Notre Dame as well. My grandpa has pictures from the 70s that there was cars parked there in front of Notre Dame.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And under the Eiffel Tower not that long ago either.
Oh, I miss walking under the Eiffel Tower. Now there's that stupid glass wall everywhere.
Yeah. So
So
very
lame.
different.
Well, thank you, Claudine. And we hope all of you will go to Luxembourg Gardens and walk around while listening to Claudine's wonderful information. Or you can hire her to take you around herself because she's in Paris for the next 3 months, hanging out, waiting for doing some tours, doing some trip planning. So contact her on ClaudineHemingway.com and tune in next week for a new episode.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.